Welcome back, endgame fans. The Waltzman's got another position to show you. And it's from a game between Anita Gara and Irina Krush, played at the Women's Chess Olympiad in 2018, in a match between Hungary and the United States. And it was a clash of the national champions. Anita Gara is many times Hungarian women's champion, and Irina Krush, likewise, is a multiple winner of the United States Women's Championships. And this was the last game in the match to finish. The United States were ahead 2-1, and so a win for Gara, who had king and rook, against Krush, who had just king and a pawn, would tie the scores. So the choice here lies between the moves rook a3 check and rook g8 check. And Gara had to decide between these two. Now, if you'd like to try and work out for yourself whether rook a3 or rook g8 wins, then pause the video here. Okay, welcome back if you had a go at this problem. Now, before looking at some specific variations, I'd like to make two general observations about the position. And I have to say, I found the published study of rook endings by Averbach and Kopayev very useful here, and I thoroughly recommend their book if you can get hold of it. So the first point is that we're dealing with a rook's pawn. Now, rook's pawns are often presented as exceptions in endgame theory, and they typically are positioned after the authors have discussed other types of pawn. But in practice, rook pawn endings arise more often than center pawns, simply because they're much less likely to be exchanged earlier in the game. So it's not a good idea to skip these exceptions. On the contrary, I would recommend making sure that you do study them. So the second point is just to be aware of the winning zone in this ending. Now, where a rook's pawn has got to the 5th rank and is supported by the defending king on g3, and where the attacking rook is in the far corner, a8 here, then the winning zone will be any legal square the attacking king can occupy in one of 3 rectangles. So the first rectangle runs between the squares c1, c4, d4 and d1. The second rectangle occupies the squares e1 to e5, and the third rectangle occupies the squares f1 to f6, and then moving across h6 to h1. So if your king is on any square within that region that it's legal to occupy, then you have a win if you have the move. Now notice if the black king, instead of standing on g3, stood on g4, then the winning zone would change. It would be a little bit different. And likewise, if we move the attacking rook from the corner square h1 and put it on one of the 3 other corner squares, a1, h8 or h1, again, there would be some variation to the winning zone. And if you consult the book by Averbach and Kopayev I mentioned earlier, you'll find a very helpful discussion of these winning zones. Okay, so here Gara's king stands on e5, that's within the winning zone, and so she definitely has a win in this position. The only question is whether to play rook a3 or rook g8. And there's a general rule that you can draw on to help in situations like this. If the attacking king lies on the 5th rank or above, then you should be playing rook a3. On the other hand, if the attacking king lies below the 5th rank, then you should be playing rook g8. And the reason is that these moves will always win, provided your king is is within the winning zone. Now it's true, there are in fact some squares above or below the 5th rank where either move is playable and would win. But my advice though is always to abide by the general rule. And you can remember which way around is right by just imagining the white king being on g5 or c3 in line with the black king. Now if the white king was on g5, then you certainly wouldn't want to play rook g8 because the king would be in the way of giving the check. And likewise, if the king was on c3, you wouldn't want to be playing rook a3 because, well, the king would get in the way again. So this is the way of remembering which way around it should be. Okay, so applying these general principles, we know that white has a certain win with rook a3 check. I want to consider two defences here. First of all, if black goes king g2, I want to show you the effectiveness of a flank attack on the passed pawn. So the white king comes in to f4, the pawn advances, and now the quickest win is actually to check on a2 with the rook. But let's look instead at king g4 because it's more interesting. That pawn's attacked, so it advances to h2. The rook gives a check. The black king goes to g1, hoping to queen the pawn. And the white king, in fact, comes to g3, allowing the pawn to queen. And the kings are in opposition along the g file. And that's significant for a reason I'll explain a bit later. Well, if black were to queen, h1 equals queen, then there would be an immediate checkmate, rook a1 checkmate. But instead it looks as though black can get out of it by under-promoting to a knight with check. However, white wins with king f3 because next move white will pick up the knight and that will win the game. Okay, so let's go back. White has played the winning rook a3 check. But instead of king g2, a tougher defense is to play king g4, trying to shoulder barge the enemy king. And the only way for white to meet this is with a disruptive check, the move rook a4 check. Now if black were to play king g3, and white can meet that with king f5 with a winning flank attack similar to the previous line. But instead black can be annoying and play king g5 opposing the enemy king. However, it's still one for white. We can advance with king e4. Black tries to keep the opposition. White gives a check with king e3. And black counters, again trying to keep the opposition. White plays king e2, and we can see that it's no longer possible for black to keep the opposition because if he plays king g2, he would be abandoning the h-pawn. So instead, this pawn advances, and that buys white some time. He can now try and get in front of the pawn with king f1, and if black seeks to stop this with king h2, then white has rook a3, and it will be checkmate the next move. So we've shown that rook a3 is a winning move in this position. Unfortunately, however, Gara didn't play rook a3 check, and instead she played rook g8 check, which is a mistake. And it's a mistake that Krush took advantage of. She played in response the excellent move king f3. This is a good move because it impedes her opponent's king on e5. The game continued rook h8, king g3 defending the pawn, king e4 advancing. Krush immediately advances her pawn with h3, king e3 trying to take the opposition, king g2. Gara gave a check, rook g8 check, and now Krush played an important move. She played king f1. I notice now that if white were to meet this move with king f3, then h2 would be possible, because black is threatening to queen the pawn with check. The kings would be opposed on the f file and not the g file as previously. So Gara instead tried rook f8 check. Krush moved king g1. Well, there's nothing better for white than king e2. But after h2, that pawn is now only one square away from becoming a queen. And after white checked on g8 again, Krush played king h1. And we can see now that the game is drawn, because if white plays king f1 or king f2, it's an immediate stalemate. I think that Gara instead tried to prolong matters. She played rook a8, but the king came to g2, threatening to queen, so she had to go back again. Rook g8 check, king h1, and at this point Gara conceded the draw with king f2 with a stalemate. Okay, so I hope that you found this position instructive and interesting, and that it will help you in your own games in the future. Thank you for watching.